I lived my life basically to honor my family, because, of everything that they've done for me. It's like the least I can do is be able to, like, give them the thanks back.
What's the last stuff that happened before this event? We did the Marine Corps birthday celebration.
Yes.
I was a little concerned about you.
Yes, I know.
That's another reason why I wanted to have you on here. I was like, are you good though?
I am good. I am good. Yes.
But no, here's the thing. Can I tell a story?
Go ahead. Yeah.
All right.
I'm curious about it too, because I'm like towards the end, like the beginning part of it, it was all great and like full of memories, and towards the end, it was like, okay, what happened?
Yeah. So you might have forgotten a couple things, but
yes.
let me refresh you. So first of all, it was a great event.
Absolutely.
I was genuinely shocked at how many people actually showed
Seriously.
up. Here's the thing: when I created that event, I was under the impression that it was going to be probably the really close people that we interacted with, and probably just that.
Right.
Because one of the things that I noticed from our unit, by the way, let me introduce you properly. Do you prefer? Is it Cesar?
Cesar.
Cesar.
Yeah.
Cesar.
If we were in Mexico and we were like my family, everybody would say Cesar.
Cesar. Yeah. And my nickname for you was always truly jealous, because his last name Trujillo. Trujillo. But we've known each other for many, many years. And so just to reiterate what I was saying before with the event, so I didn't really expect a lot of people to show up, because I thought, so here's the thing. When we got it, we all entered like around the same time.
Yes.
I'm talking about like months apart.
Right.
Like,
yeah, exactly.
I checked in. I was one of the first to check in of the Lance Corporals of the new junior Marines.
Yeah.
And everybody else kind of started literally month after month.
Right. Yeah.
New join. And that was the most amount of the biggest influx of Marines I think we ever received at one sitting.
Oh, wow.
In 1 year anyway.
Okay.
And ever since then, I did not see that same amount of Marines.
You know what? Yeah.
Come in.
It's fun. It's funny you mentioned like that. Yeah. Cause, I remember coming in like around the summertime. I think it was like 2018, around that time frame. I think 19. And, I got checked in. I know you were already there. And then, the new join that came after me was, I believe it or not, Seracero. I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, it was, I think it was, okay. So it was me that it was either Cesar was like third. So it was like me, Kano, and then McGee, and then Cesar in that order.
Yeah.
I
think so. I think you're right. Actually,
yeah. Cause I think I'm pretty sure he was third.
Right.
But I know Kano and McGee were first.
Right. Okay.
I just don't know who came, if it was McGee first and then Kano, or Kano and then McGee. I'm pretty sure it was Kano then McGee.
I think so.
But anyway, pretty soon after I checked in, everybody else checked in.
Right.
And so it was unique because it never happened that way throughout my entire enlistment. Once I checked out, in fact, just as I was checking out, we would get like one. And then maybe in like 6 months or a year later, we would get another one.
Yes.
Where with us, it was like 1 month I come in, then the next month Kano, then the next month McGee, then the next month Cetacero. So it was like month after month. So we were all junior Marines together.
Right. Yeah.
And so this, we got to really grow up in the Marine Corps together. And so when we all were getting out, we're all getting out at the same time.
Right.
So we got to kind of stick our enlistment out for about the same amount of time.
Yes.
Where our leadership didn't. It was different, because for them it was like, and I didn't realize that until the event, because there was a lot of us coming in together, and I was like, okay, cool. So we all became super close friends. Right. And then when we had this event, I asked, because I got together with some of our leadership before the event. Because I wanted to invite them formally. For sure. So I got together with them, and I was like, hey, invite any of your close friends. Because I'm thinking that they went through the same thing that I went through, that they had a group of Marines that they kind of grew up with, and then that they might want to invite them. And so I was like, hey, invite your group, right? Because I thought everybody has a group.
Right.
I clearly was wrong, because it was like, they're here. This is them. I was like, oh, okay. Right. Well, yeah. Anybody else who wants to be there, invite them. And so, and there was like the little group that you saw. I'm sure you didn't. No, I don't think you met. You didn't meet.
There was like a handful of Marines there that
you did not. You didn't know.
I didn't know. For the majority of them, it was like old leadership and like us junior Marines and stuff, and like the whole ball.
But there was some that checked out before you came in that was there just like a month or two before you guys came in.
And there was one Marine in particular, and to this day I forget his name, but visually, he appeared like somebody I had known that I like. It was like one of those like few months that I was in when I first checked in, and then like a bunch of the leadership checked out, or a bunch of like the senior lance corporals checked out, and he was like one of them. But from what I remember, I mean, I was being told his name is this. When in my head I was like, no, it's somebody else that I'm thinking. But like facial wise, he looked just like somebody I knew, but it must have been either from somebody from comm school or from MCT or from basic, because he looked just like him, but
yeah,
I couldn't put it together.
So when I checked in, I checked in like right at the tail end of the other generation of Marines before us that were just checking out.
Right.
So I checked in and I got to meet them and do a couple drills with them, and then they checked out. And then you guys came in.
Right.
That's literally how close it was.
Yeah.
Where I got to meet them, and so like when I saw them at the event, I was like, "Oh my god,
Yeah.
I haven't seen you in like 6 years."
Dude, isn't it crazy?
And so like to see them again, it was crazy, and
For sure.
and they still remembered me obviously because they came up to me and they're like they still knew my
Yeah,
name, so
yeah.
they're like, "Hey Lopez, like I haven't seen you in forever," and I was like,
Right.
"Geez, like so." Anyway, to get back to the story I was telling,
For sure, yeah.
the cool thing that we got to experience that I now know to be unique is that we kind of grew up together, so we're all super close, and there's a big group of us. So when that event, when I had the event, like there was a separation. I could see the leadership separation versus like the junior.
But you know what? I feel like that's kind of like, obviously, like when we were like, Lance Corporals, even PFCs and stuff like that, we still saw, when we were in the squad bay anyways, we would have like our downtime and stuff like that, whether it's chow or maintenance, whatever the case is, we would always, us, junior Marines be, huddled together.
Yep. Leadership was out in the office.
Yes.
And that was one of the things that when I got into leadership myself, I was like, I don't want to be in an office all day.
Yeah.
Like I want to, so I had to balance, being in the office and doing my role as a leader.
Right.
But I don't want to be away from the junior. That was like my thing. I don't want to be away from the junior Marines because like at the end of the day, like if we were to go get sent somewhere, like we're going to be together. Like,
right.
And we still have to have a rapport,
of course,
a trust that we all have within each other, where it's like, this guy isn't just like my boss. Like he's somebody that I look up to. Right. Like that's always how I wanted leadership to be. And so when I saw the segregation, because there was segregation of leadership in junior Marines. Yeah. I hate to put it that way, but there was. And there was like this is your place, this is mine.
Yes.
And I never liked that because look, there is going to be a line at the end of the day. There's going to be address someone formally and hey, there's that for a reason. But if I have to remind you, there's something wrong. Like from my opinion, it's always been like, if I have to remind you that I'm in charge, am I really in charge? That was one thing that I wondered when I saw some leaders behave that way, where it's like, hey, you are this rank and I am this rank. I feel like at that point you are creating a wall that they're never going to be able to be fully comfortable around you.
Yes.
And I don't like that. Right. I think you can be comfortable with someone and when the time calls to be formal,
for sure,
you remember those customs, because there has to be some sort of what's the word?
Discipline in a sense. Right?
Yeah, discipline.
Yeah.
There's some good order and discipline.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
there has to be good order and discipline, and so there is a place for that. But when we're working, I think that when we're working, we have to be comfortable with each other.
Oh, absolutely.
Forget the rank. Forget just what do you need at this moment in time so that I can help you do your job better.
Right.
That's the most important part for me when we're working. When we're out in going to main side, or if we're going to somewhere where people are going to look at us and be like, this is the standard of the Marine Corps.
Correct.
That's a different situation.
Right.
And at that point, don't act a fool.
Yes, of course.
Right. I think that's basic rules, like the common sense.
Yeah, because like how leadership always tells us like when we were to get the privilege, because obviously we never always went to main side and stuff like that, right? So whenever we would get the opportunity to go to main side, I mean, at least for me, I would consider it a privilege, especially like if we were like for chow or for other activities, whatever the case is, right? So we would go to main side. And obviously, main side is just, for the most part, strictly just Navy personnel, right? We had our own separate building outside of the main side, right? So it never failed. Every time we would go like, you know, to the next or whatever the case is, you see the, I say the squids, right?
That's what I called them for a long time.
Yeah, you know, you see the squids.
Shameless.
Yeah. So you see, you know, a bunch of the recruits that are, you know, still going through basic or whatnot, or some that are just freshly getting in, you know, into the whole acclimation of being, you know, active duty and stuff like that. Never fails. They'd see like, you know, us like, whether it's like a 3-4, you know, our squad or whatever.
Right.
You know, like they would just like, you know, be all like googly eyed about, you know, seeing Marines and stuff like that. So I would always remember leadership saying like, you know, there's always going to be someone looking up to you or looking at you. So it's wise. It would behoove you.
It would behoove
yeah,
you.
Right.
Yeah.
It would behoove you to act accordingly.
Yeah.
Right? So, and then not only that, but like, you know, there's always going to be, you know, one or two out of the group that may be a little bit out of order. So it's up to us, you know, especially the senior ones, to be able to, hey, you know, get your shit together.
Hey, get in line.
Yes.
Like, because like at the end of the day, if one of us looks bad in our group, we all look bad.
Yes.
Immediately. And so then it's all going to fall on us. So that makes sense.
Yes.
Right. When we're with people that we don't know.
Right.
100%. But when we're in the workplace, it's just me and you, we're setting up radios or whatever the job is. Right. And you know, hey, like, how do I program this thing? Like, who cares? Like at that point, how can I help you? Right. That's my job as a NCO or whatever. Like as a leader in the group, that's my role, is how can I make your life easier? Like that's it. Because at the end of the day, if you don't trust me enough to be like, I can't ask him a question, right? Because he's gonna get upset,
right? If
I don't do it the right way. That's no way to work, man.
No.
Like we can't work together like that.
Absolutely not.
And that happens whether it's the military or in civilian side. Yeah. If I'm uncomfortable to come up to you and talk to you like a human being when we're at work, how can I be expected to do my job to the best of my ability if I can't ask you questions or I can't say something a certain way in the way that's comfortable? For
sure. You got to be very, like, especially as a leader, you know, once you pick up your blood stripe and you're an NCO and above, you definitely have to be more of an like an approachable person, right? Because like I understand, like, yes, like as a leader, whether it's a corporal, sergeant and above, you have to carry yourself a certain way because you have junior Marines, you know, X, Y, and Z looking up to you and stuff. But at the same time too, I've always kind of like put myself in kind of like their shoes. Like although I was always just a, you know, Lance Corporal, right? Towards the end, I was one of the senior Lance Corporals in our group, right? But I always tried to be very approachable, whether it's, you know, just a simple question or an actual like knowledge question, whether it's radios or chat tech, whatever the case is, right? It's always, you know, I've always seen it as, you know, be approachable, because, you know, I would want someone to ask me a question versus them just venture off and try to figure out on their own and then potentially get themselves hurt or, you know, a group hurt, you know?
Right.
So at the end of the day, you know, to me, like, I'd rather have you ask that question to me. And if I don't have that answer, stand by. I'll figure it out for you. I'll come back to you. You know, because there's no, I've never found any point in like being that like all macho, like aggressive and like all authority and leader, where it's like, oh, you should know this and figure the fuck out. I'm like, well, thanks a lot. You know?
Let me tell you something. I at first, I kind of got it once I started dealing with like my own personal stuff, right? Like once I started addressing like my insecurities, I started addressing my own reasons for. One of the reasons for being a Marine was kind of taking back control of my life. Okay. That was one of the driving forces. There were many in play, but that was one of them. And I can understand why a lot of people who have maybe had rough, because people who become Marines aren't your healthiest minded individuals. I just hate to put it that way, but not everybody's that way. But we're unique individuals, man. Yes. Like we don't enlist in the Marine Corps. We want to do something great. Okay. Like, and it's not always unhealthy, but a lot of times it is. And we have to be honest about that, because if we can't be honest about that, we can't address the bad leaders. Yes. No, okay. Right. So I myself, when I enlisted, I knew nothing about leadership, just like anybody else. I was just a kid. Mm-hmm. And so when I enlisted and I went to boot camp, I thought I understood. I was like, oh, okay. So take control of everything, right? Yeah. so bulldoze your way through everything. And that's not correct. In fact, I wish that was one thing that they focused more on at the end of boot camp, was to say, hey, this was specifically for one reason. This was just to prepare you for the chaos of combat.
Right.
This is not at all how you should carry yourself. I wish it was, because to be honest with you, I was like, this is what Marine's about, right?
Right.
Like
Yes.
we're just gonna take what we want, and and I was like that when I first when I enlisted,
and it's understandable. You know?
And so not you guys might have not noticed it because I just wasn't put in a position of leadership until very late in my career, which I'm very happy for.
Yes.
I'm very happy that it took that long because I got to grow up and grow out of that mentality of because when you don't know leadership, the truth is when you don't know how to confidently lead, you have to be aggressive,
right?
Because it's like, oh, I have to command respect then, and you don't earn it,
yeah.
And so we saw plenty of those guys, right? Of people who were like trying to shout their way through leadership.
Yes.
You just can't do it.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work
no.
because we're not in boot camp anymore. No. Okay, so one of the things that you have to remember is that we were recruits,
yes.
And so we were trying to earn something.
Yes.
And once you get into your unit, mm-hmm. right? Everybody's a Marine. We're more equals than boot camp.
Right.
So you have to address it that way. And even if they're lower ranked than you, they're still Marines.
Of course.
And there has to be that basic respect of, hey, we both went through the same thing. We both earned it. So yes, you're a junior Marine and there are things for you to learn, but you won't learn them well if I'm shouting at you.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that I had to grow out of. And so I understand it. Mm-hmm. I understand why leaders resort to screaming their way through. It's because they're not confident. They're not confident at that they have the respect of the group. And so what do? They shout, because then if I can command through fear, then it's better than for them, in their eyes, it's better than them not listen to me. Right. And so, but what is that short term? That's short term thinking, because at some point, either a group of them or one of those Marines will have enough. Yeah. And they'll be like, I don't care anymore. Like do your worst. Mm-hmm. Right. And then they start to rebel. Right. It's always how I've seen it happen. Right. Every time. So, I think that to your point that you were saying about to not be approachable is just not a confident leader. And that's the truth. But there's a reason for that. Yeah. And so I think that if we could do something about the culture in the Marine Corps, that once you're in the unit, you adapt a culture of, hey, we're garrisoned, right? Like we're not at war. And so our mentality will be more about learning. Yes. And so what did we do when we went to the range? Were drill instructors screaming at you when you were in the range? No, they're not allowed near you. No. Why? Because you won't learn. No, exactly. If they're screaming at you, you won't learn. Right. And so then how could the mentality be that because we're continuously learning throughout our careers. Right. So how could the idea be that I command through fear and I'm shouting at you like you were in boot camp and then expect learning to happen? Right. Yeah.
And I think in a sense, like, so when it comes to like learning, for example, like obviously I'm thinking back to like the schoolhouse, right? When we're in 29 Palms. So obviously that's a lot more different, right? Because we're already integrated with the Corps, right? Mm-hmm. So we're in a more like classroom learning environment, right, which is what we've all grown up to traditionally learn in, right? Obviously middle school, high school, elementary school, that was just our type of learning environment. And to take it back a notch a little bit towards boot camp, right? Obviously we would have our drill instructors all up in our asses, screaming in our faces, right, about getting the shit done, this and that, blah, 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 right? But it all, like how they explained to us in the beginning, everything happens or everything is done for a specific reason, right? So in the event that, we're deployed and we're, in the shit and we're getting incoming fire, right, and we have people yelling at us, we're not in a, like, oh shit, like internal panic mode, right? And then unfortunately, some people just tend to freeze up. And obviously we know when situations like that, for lack of terms, that can't happen. We can't afford to freeze up. Why? Because the people get killed or hurt. So in a sense, we have those moments where, like, yes, we went through boot camp. We passed that per se check marker phase, right? Where we graduated from boot camp. Now we're Marines. Now we're in the actual schoolhouse learning environment. It's a little bit different, right? And then once we get back to the unit, it's a little bit of combination of like the both per se in certain senses. But more than enough, we're usually just in a strict like kind of learning environment. But it never fails that there are some moments where you're in a case, for example, as a leader, had to take charge, and I guess in a sense like per se like our little group, especially when you became a corporal in the end, I know like sometimes, especially in the beginning, it was kind of hard for us, especially as your peers, to kind of like, in a sense, not with all due respect, like take you seriously sometimes, because like you were like you're a brother, you're a friend, you were like right there in the shit with
Dude,
us.
we
So
grew up together.
exactly, yeah. So then like when we would, just in like as small as shit, when we would get information for morning counts, right? For and then for briefing and everything, and we'd be in the background, and we'd have Vega or somebody else just saying, "Oh, you're a bitch" or whatever.
Yeah, making comments, and like I didn't care, like that stuff like that. Like I thought it was funny,
Right.
And so that stuff, for me, it was like whatever, dude. Like
Right, yeah,
I think that's part of that stuff that
It's part of the camaraderie.
camaraderie.
Yeah, in a sense. Yeah.
and so like as long as it's not a thing where it's hey, we need to get something done, and this is now disruptive.
Right.
Like that's a different story, and
Right,
I don't think you guys ever did that.
Nah.
Like you guys never went to the point where it's like, okay, like we're literally, you're interrupting our ability to do things. At that point, then I have to say something. But when you guys would do that, I mean, I thought that was fun. Yeah, like I never, that stuff never bothered me, and I was like. And sometimes I could tell that it bothered the other guys. In fact, one of the criticisms that I received, and I don't think you guys ever heard this, was in behind closed doors in leadership, was that I was too soft on you guys. That I wasn't aggressive enough with you guys. That was the biggest criticism I received.
And you know what? Like it's funny because like that came down the grapevine, and we've heard about that too. So that's when we kind of like all came together. It's like, all right. Let's kind of calm it down a little bit. I get it. We're all friends and stuff like that. But the good thing about like us, our group, our peers, was that like although we were still getting like some like other like fresh bodies coming into our group and stuff, we were still good about policing each other, which was ultimately good. Because like you can have a great leader and everything like that, but if you're gonna have a rowdy crowd, you're never gonna make contact. So it was always good that we had you per se as like our immediate leader towards the end of our time together. But then we also had, you had us, and we would do good about, all right, if you guys are like crossing the line, we'll police each other, knock it down, knock it off, and then, we'll reconvey later on. So.
Well, let me ask you this. And again, I want 100% transparency.
For sure.
You're not going to hurt my feelings. I just want to know, because I've never asked this question to anybody else before. Okay. So from your perspective, right, give me your honest review of me as a leader. I want the good, the bad. What was it that you saw that was like
terrible? No.
Hey, you heard it here first.
Totally joking. No, honestly, brother, like you got like kind of keep in mind. So like, we were together as I think PFCs at the time, right?
I probably Lance Corporals, because I picked up Lance Corporal almost immediately.
Yeah, I was Lance Corporal. Yeah. So. We came in as Lance Corporals, and then, we pretty much did everything from the ground up, from going to ATs and, all their drills and everything together and stuff. Honestly, like I was really happy when they promoted you to corporal. I was like, this is one of the guys that truly deserves it. He's knowledgeable. He's, always, go getter, anything that needs to be done. You were like the man to like, all right, Lopez, let's get this shit done. And, while yes, it's a little bit like we were talking a little bit earlier, like that you were trying to find that balance between, being a friend and being a leader as well. Mm-hmm. I know like a lot of the leadership, behind closed doors, they were like, oh, I understand you're their friends and stuff like that, but you also need to be, like the main guy, you need to set the example and keep them in line and stuff like that. But that's the thing where like sometimes I can feel a little bit disconnected, because the thing is, it's like, while yes, I understand that there's always like a purpose to why everything should be done a certain way, but is that ultimately, the ultimate, like, I'm sorry, is that the only way to go about accomplishing things? Like, Of course not. There's multiple answers and different avenues of approach to get to the same place, right? Mm-hmm. So if we're working, and it never felt like when we're in a squad band, whether it's like maintenance or whatever, just like we're doing maintenance and stuff, and then we would be, a little too loud, or just like, just shooting the shit too much. And then they'd look at you like, are you going to handle this? Are you going to do something or what? And it's like, bro, like, I mean, we're working, we're fucking having fun while working, And so it's like, those were one of the things that like, kind of like always rubbed me the wrong way about leadership, that they always wanted to kill the fun in doing shit. Right. Cause like the shit that we're doing, it sucks. It's not the, the funnest things ever, but I mean, if we can throw in a little bit of fun, in it, I mean, why not? And we're still being productive. We're not being ultimately too distracted per se. So I know with you would give us a lot of wiggle room with that, and you give us a lot of leash with that. But then obviously if we would get out of line, you'd be right there. So I definitely appreciate that about you. That you would try to seek the balance of both worlds. And when it came down to like business, right? It was always professional and it was never out of line, and vice versa to us towards you as well. I never honestly, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't never honestly ever saw anybody getting online with you per se, because at the end of the day, you're still our peer, you're still our friend, you're still our brother. So the last thing I would want to do is be on your bad side or disrespect you. But to get to your question, no, honestly, like as far as like all my immediate leaders, between you, Kano, Bean, because he was like one of my first squad leaders when I got there. Everybody was ultimately really, really great to me. I never really saw an issue per se with you personally. You were always, great, knowledgeable with everything. So you're kind of like Vega and another like, go-to guy whenever it came to any questions with radio or anything like that. So I had no complaints for you. Pros and cons would reflect.
That was a good way to end that. Thank you. No, that's good to hear. I just, like I said, the things that I'm very critical. Nobody's more critical of me than me. And that's one of the reasons why I'm chatting with you right now, is because I don't think that I did a good enough job in that time frame to have really gotten to know you guys well. And I think that I missed that opportunity while I was with you guys, to spend more time with you guys outside of drill, to really get to interact with you guys outside of the work environment. I think that that's a failure of mine, outside of, or in my time as a leader. And I was too focused on being at work, and then when I'm done, I go right back home and then just like, basically not cause any trouble in my head, right? And the truth of what you said was that, first of all, I want to confirm what you're saying. I never saw you guys as troublesome, and the leadership for some reason would see you guys that way. And it was like, why aren't you, you're not taking charge enough. You're not like getting them in line enough. And my question is like, well, what's out of line? Right. Because out of line is them having fun. Are we not accomplishing the tasks that were assigned? Exactly. Because we never missed tasks. No, it was we got stuff done that we need to get done. Yeah. Was there the occasion from time to time where we ran into a lot of problems with the equipment or something on the other side, like we couldn't get in contact with the other side because something was going on with their gear? Right. Like, did that happen? Yeah, but that's part of the training. Like that was part of the troubleshooting. That's part of the learning. Mm-hmm. And so I just never saw is someone being disrespectful? Like, is someone yelling? Or like the biggest complaint they had was the phones, right? Mm-hmm. And so I can understand if we, for example, everybody was on their phone and just sitting and just relaxing or whatever. But the thing is, there isn't always like, once we have equipment up and running, we can teach like hip pocket classes. Yeah, we can find little things to do. But if we aren't having fun while we're working, to some degree, if we don't incorporate some level of us like just conversating and because the reason why the phone thing happens is because we're not allowed to chit chat. Because that was like a thing of like, oh, you can't, if you're talking too much, you're not working. Right. And so what happens? Well, we don't want to be loud so they don't notice us. So people start going on their phones. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, oh, and then if you bark at that, okay, so you can't do anything that's not Marine Corps related. But the thing is, having close relationship to each other, building a camaraderie, that is Marine Corps related. It is. That's the biggest part of working together, is that we have a relationship that's we're comfortable enough where when things hit the fan, like we understand each other so well that I know what it means when you change your inflection in your voice. Right. So like if you notice me start to, hey, like he doesn't do this unless something's going on. Right. So that's when everybody's just the recognition of each other's personalities. We're like in unison. Yes. There's that connection, and that doesn't happen unless we get to know all parts of our personalities, and that means interacting and having fun, and sometimes saying things that maybe, hey, this was kind of uncomfortable, and so going through all of those phases. That's the most human part of being a Marine. Sure. is just the learning the personalities of the people you work with, so you know how to best work with them. That's an essential part. Yes. So I just never saw that as a problem, and leadership was upset that I didn't see that as an issue. Yeah, you know what? Like, I don't understand it either. Like how you
you said initially, like if the mission is being accomplished and, we have some downtime because it never fails. Like, have you ever noticed that when every time we would have like some sort of op, we would be usually one of the first ones up. One of the first ones up, and it never failed that whether it was Miramar or what is it out in Cherry Valley or
Cherry Point.
Cherry Point. Whether it's one of them two, it's like we were always waiting on somebody else. We're always waiting on somebody else.
And mind you, these were active duty units. A lot of these were active duty units. They weren't always reserve units like we were. And yet we were able to get radio up. We were able to get our link established, but then their side was still working through problems. And the only reason we knew that was because we had gotten numbers from the guys we interacted with, and we would text them and call them. We weren't supposed to do it, but like we couldn't find out any other way because there's no way to chat with them.
Right, exactly.
So we would message them and be like, hey, are you guys good? They're like, nah, we're still working through blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay. So we sit over here. So then we're the ones that are treated like criminals,
right?
Because it's like, oh, well, you could be teaching a class, but there's only so much you can do before you're like, what else haven't we talked about?
Yeah.
And then you run out of things to talk about. And so then you're missing the human element. Which is the most vital one, because when you think about it, Marines with low camaraderie are often the ones that are like cracking whips at their junior Marines or at the senior leadership even, right? The ones that are have the worst camaraderie are missing the human element of them being able to joke around once in a while, being able to relax, being able to, that's because if we're always in a high stress environment, how are we going to deal with it? Like at some point it's going to boil over.
Right.
And that's what happens with a lot of Marines when there's an issue with like mental health. If you're constantly in that state of like tense, like at some point something's going to give.
Right.
And then nobody's going to want to deal with the repercussions of that. Right. Because it's going to be like, oh, what could we have done? You could have just treated them like human beings.
Right. Exactly. Let them have fun here and there, and the rest is history. But
anyway, that's the rant.
Yeah.
So I want to get to the most important part for me, which is I want to know the person. I want to know more about how your upbringing. I want to know what it was like being a young Cesar and what your upbringing was like. Can you take me through your childhood and what was kid Cesar like?
So let me start like a little bibliography here.
Yeah.
Autobiography, right?
Yeah.
So born in October 97, right? I was born in Waukegan, right outside of Great Lakes, so just a couple minutes away from there. So I'm born and raised there. I did grow up a little bit in Mexico here and there up until I was 5.
What part?
Tonatico, Mexico, state of Mexico. Yeah,
so all right.
I'd stay with my grandparents out there, and then I would come back and forth a little bit here and there. But then right when I was 5, I was like pretty much permanently staying here with my family and stuff. So I would pretty much never left Waukegan. Waukegan's all I really knew up until I left the Marine Corps. Got into the Marine Corps. Then that's when I pretty much got to explore the world. Obviously, Chicago, and then Milwaukee, Wisconsin, because I had family up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So occasionally I would go up there. But other than that, dude, I didn't really know anything outside of my little world until I got into the Marine Corps, right? When I was in high school, I would go on occasional college visits. So I would go to Ohio, Indiana, visit some colleges out there and stuff. But I didn't really know how big the world was until I really got out of my shell and, got into the Corps. So ultimately I'm grateful for that I got to experience that, be able to see outside of what I'm just, what's handed to me basically. But I mean, childhood for me was honestly great. I mean, I have nothing to complain about. My parents, they did the best they could, right? It was just me and my sister, right? So it's about 7 years apart that me and my sister have. But we're literally great friends. We're best friends. We always grew up really close knit together. So me and my family, we're very family oriented, especially with my aunts, my uncles, my cousins. Cause on my mom's side, I have a big family. Mm-hmm. I have 4 aunts, 4 uncles, and each of them had a shit ton of kids. So I have a shit ton of cousins for sure. And the cool thing about it or the beautiful part about it was that we all kind of grew up around the same age. So it was boom, one kid, boom, one kid, boom, one kid.
Right.
So I had a bunch of cousins that are relatively around the same age as me. And to this day, we still keep in close contact with, family outings or family get-togethers, holidays and stuff like that. It's always been important to us. So we try to do, as best as we can to come together, especially now that we're a little older and everybody has their own lives. Everybody works or stuff like that. Everybody has their girlfriends, their wives. So it's sometimes a little bit more difficult to see each other. So the times that we do get together, it's always a blast. It's always a bomb, you know. So I always look forward to those moments and stuff too, because you know now that we're a little bit older, like I said, you know, we don't really get to like really experience that anymore, just because you know life happens, right? But for the most part, though, like I mean, childhood for me was great. I was into a lot of sports, you know, whatever I can get into. I played baseball, soccer, volleyball throughout my time in school, especially like middle school and high school. That's when you start getting into teams and stuff for your schools. So I remember middle school all the way up until high school, I played both soccer and volleyball. I do remember, I think one time, I think it was either 6th or 7th grade. I forget which one of those two. I did join like our middle school's basketball team, thinking I can, you know, be like LeBron James or something like that, dude. And nah, dude, I could never pick it up, bro. I could never pick it up. So I think I was only on the team for like, I shit you not, like maybe like 2 or 3 games, not even a whole season.
So was it that you didn't enjoy it, or you didn't feel you were any good at it?
A little combination of both.
Okay.
I didn't really enjoy it because outside of like, per se, my peers, I mean, my peers and my family, nobody really played basketball. My cousins and stuff like that, they pretty much were strictly all about soccer, right? Because Hispanic household, right? So I remember even to the times too when like my city league, they would have like, you know, like the basketball, baseball leagues. So my dad would put me into the soccer and baseball leagues for the longest. And I remember being a kid, I'd pull up to like my aunt's house, my uncle's house, wherever we're getting together that weekend, and I'd pull up like the very first few times. I'd pull up with my baseball glove, baseball, and a bat. Like, hey, who wants to go to the field and play a couple rounds of baseball? Crickets, nobody. So, and then I would see all my cousins, you know, getting into soccer basically. So I remember I played like a good 4 or 5 seasons with like my city's baseball league. And after that, I kind of like quit that, and I just strictly was all about soccer, just because, you know, if I'm not gonna have anybody to play with, might as well jump on the wagon, you know.
Right,
so,
right.
And then, I mean, I ended up enjoying it just because, you know, like I saw like my dad really enjoyed playing and also watching soccer. So in a sense too, I kind of like, you know, wanted to, you know, make my dad proud in a sense, right? So I would pick up soccer, and I pretty much played that up into, you know, my days of high school. So, and then in high school, I don't know if your school did this, but my high school had ROTC, JROTC.
Yeah, ours didn't, surprisingly. I don't want to say that I was upset, but I would have liked to have tried to see, you know, get more options and see what's this world like.
Right.
I think it probably would have made me want to go even more, to be completely honest with you.
For sure.
But you did ROTC.
Yeah.
But before we get into that, I do want to ask you, you mentioned your dad.
Yeah.
You wanted to make him proud.
For sure.
How would you describe your relationship with him growing up?
Very, very close. Very close. Much closer than my mom, only because growing up, I would see my dad more than my mom. My mom would work night shifts. So the only times I really saw her was when I would go get on the bus to go to school.
What did they do for work?
So they were both like factory jobs for the longest, right? Just whatever they can land their hands on. My dad, you know, thanks to God though, he's been with the same company since as long as I can remember, since I've been walking basically.
Yeah.
My dad started off like working with, so you know how you go to stores and you get products and they have like the plastic security moldings. Basically, you take them off and the plastic mold is still like the mold of the product.
Sure.
So my dad worked at a company where they basically designed those plastic moldings and stuff like that. So like a lot of his big companies were like off, like, you know, the bug spray,
Sure.
Body. It was some kind of like body, like Axe kind of
Axe
body spray.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So anything that really required a molding, my dad's company would basically, you know, do.
Nice.
So my dad started off as like, you know, kind of like a shop worker, cutting plastic, putting big roll. And these were like big rolls of plastic that would go on these huge ass machines that were like basically as long as a building. It was kind of like a conveyor belt kind of setting. Mm-hmm. And they would have like multiple machines. So like one machine will be doing this, one machine will be doing that. And then they would have like their own loading, receiving. So trucks would come in, they'd load it up and off to their destination, wherever they go. So as long as I can remember, my dad would occasionally, like, you know, take me to his job site. And, you know, we were kind of like, you know, bestest of friends. You know, I was like his, you know, for lack of words, like the mini him kind of in a sense.
Can you describe what your, you mentioned that your mom you didn't see very often. So then what shifts was your dad working?
So my dad would, he would work basically like second shift, I would say.
Okay.
Because
so he got to see you after you came home from school or before?
After I got home from school.
Okay.
So like growing up, my grandpa, who's my dad's dad, he's still around, thanks God. But he would be, during the what we would call like the working part of the year. My grandpa would stay with us, and then like during the winter summer cold months, he would go back to Mexico and stay there. So my grandpa has been working here in the U.S. for years, and because of his, just the way that he would be able to come to the U.S. a lot, because before I was even thought of, my dad was still younger. My grandpa would go to work in Virginia in the tobacco fields. So he would go and come like every so often.
He's Mexican.
Bro, yeah. So, and he would tell me stories, bro, like where like, obviously I've never really been to Virginia like that. And I think you've been to Virginia, right? It's Virginia Beach, right?
I've been to Quantico.
Quantico, right. Exactly. So, I know like, I don't know exactly what realms of Virginia he was at, but like he would work basically the summer months where it was like hot as fuck, So, and then like in the tobacco fields and stuff like that. So like you're always like inhaling all the tobacco and everything like that. So ultimately, like long term, to the point like where he is now, like long term effect, like it affected him a little bit as far as like his upper respiratory and stuff like that. But kind of like getting a little sidetracked here, but because of my grandpa and how he was able to go back and forth, he actually was able to fix my parents so they can become residences and then quickly become citizens later on, especially when I was born. So because of that, my dad was able to, progress a little bit more where he was at in his job. And now he's like some kind of like a manager at the same spot where he is now. So he's definitely done a lot for sure. Like for where he's come originally to where he's at now, he's definitely done a lot for himself, but yeah, to kind of go back to where you were saying, right? So my grandpa would be the one that would ultimately be there to like, per se pick me up. So like if you have my dad and my grandpa, a lot of the stuff that I know as per se, like being a man was more because of my grandpa, because I would be with my grandpa all the freaking time.
Yeah.
So when I get off the bus until pretty much I'd go to bed, it was always me, my grandpa mostly, and then my dad eventually in the end of the day. And then the weekends, obviously both my parents and stuff like that. So there was a lot of like, happy mishaps with my grandpa that we were both learning, because I was, as far as like my dad's side, I was the first grandson, grandchild. So
okay.
Me and my grandpa, we were always like super, super close, because I had cousins in Mexico, because my dad had two siblings, my uncle and my aunt, and they stayed in Mexico for the longest until just recently. So I ultimately had cousins out there, right? So my grandpa would ultimately, though, spend more time with me per se, because obviously the working season is a lot longer than the cold season.
Yeah.
So the cold season, he'd stay with my cousins out there, but during the working months, he'd stay out here with me. So me and my grandpa, we have a very, very close relationship. So to the point now where like, even now, like it was a couple of years ago when COVID got around. I remember it was one of like the first Christmas when COVID was hitting around, and all my family got like infected, and especially and the one that got it the worst was my grandpa. He, keep in mind like all the his history with working in the field and stuff like that. He already had like somewhat of a troubled like upper respiratory system, and obviously COVID is that.
Yeah.
So that really like like put him down bad, to the point now where like he's on oxygen all the time. He can't, he can go without, having the oxygen tanks with him, but after a while he feels like he's like asphyxiating.
Yeah.
So having that dependency on oxygen kind of, sucks, because it's not the same quality of life, you can say, right?
Yeah. It's also, I'm sure it's to some degree, it's not dehumanizing, but what's the word I'm looking for? Like,
it's not the same.
Yeah, it's just a degradation of the person.
Right.
And so your quality of life is tied to your personality. So like if you have a bad quality of life, your personality is going to start to shrink, and just be, I'm sorry to hear that.
No, it's all good.
So that makes a little more sense, because then that's your dad's dad. So, you're kind of used to, you kind of understand your dad a little more by knowing his dad. And so with your mom, how would you describe your relationship with her?
I mean, honestly, like between both of my parents, we have great relationships. I wouldn't say like I have a better relationship with one or the other. although I would say like I have more of more memories with my dad than I would say my mom, just because of how I grew up.
Right.
But even up to the point where like I think it would have been like around middle school. That's when my mom stopped working third shift and she was just kind of like day shift kind of deal. So around middle school, I would constantly see both of my parents. So I still have that sense of, good rapport, relationship with both of my parents. But my mom, she's always been like my best friend, from anything from like, girlfriend issues or like, hey, like I like this girl, whatever, yada, yada, yada. And like she would always, I would always be comfortable going up to her and asking her questions. If it wasn't something like, I necessarily would be comfortable asking my dad, because obviously mom is always going to be more of a nurturing nature versus, dad is going to be like, all like authoritative, kind of deal, So if I knew like I wanted to like ask my mom something without necessarily possibly getting in trouble, I would go to my mom.
Yeah.
And then there never failed. Sometimes like, I don't know, ask your dad. And I'm like, fuck.
Yeah. But for the most part, she was the open hand. Your dad was the closed fist, right?
Yeah. But like, did I ever see like, any kind of like, like per se, like domestic violence or anything like that? No. Like honestly, like my parents, they were very loving. And obviously like, I know they probably had like issues or problems, like whether it's, marital or just life in general. But I think they did a good job of like hiding that and like keeping it behind closed doors. Right. Because it never fails, especially like in the line of work that I do now. It's like I always see, and it's human. I want to get that clear. Like it's natural to disagree, right? But there comes a certain line where you're crossing that threshold. When you're putting hands on somebody and stuff like that, it's like, okay.
Well, I think that so physical violence, from my perspective, just my opinion. I'm not a doctor. I believe that when there's physical violence involved, the resentment has gone to such a high level that I don't think that there's anything you can do to really salvage the resentment.
Right.
Because the truth is, like, you should have been broken up a long time ago if it resorts to physical violence. Sure. If it gets physical, you overstayed. And I think that that's one of the things that I saw my parents go through was you stayed way too long. Like you guys should have never had this many kids. You should have never been together this long. Like the relationship was over a long time ago.
For sure.
You should have just pulled the trigger when it was the right time and not when you had no other choice.
Right.
And I think that that's what happens because a lot of people don't learn, especially their generation. They didn't know about mental health and the impacts of how not having a healthy home is also bad for the kids too. And just the lack of information of what is a healthy home.
For sure.
Because they didn't see a healthy home. So then how are they going to reproduce a healthy home?
Right.
So I think that with that in mind, though, when you do put your hands on somebody, that should have been over a long time ago. For and sure. that's the amount of resentment there for you to have to feel like you have to put your hands on somebody that you are supposed to be. That's supposed to be your partner. Right. That's a level that I don't, you guys should just move on your separate ways and just not have contact, because the level of resentment, you have to deal with that resentment.
Right.
And you guys have to do it separately because you clearly can't do it together. And so if there's ever going to be a chance to salvage something like that, you can't be together. Like, it has to be separate.
Yeah.
And then once you've worked on your stuff, it's just because if you're activated, right? Like there's a lot of trauma. Typically there's a lot of like when in those type of relationships, there's like trauma bonds.
Right. Yes.
And there's a lack of an ability to cope. Mm-hmm. And so then what do? You just, they trigger you and you're it's called flooding. You're so flooded emotionally that your rational thinking goes out the window.
Yes, exactly.
And so you start feeling actually attacked. Like this person thinks that I'm evil, thinks that I'm the worst, and obviously no one wants to think that somebody doesn't like them,
right? Yeah, especially
someone that they're close to. So what are they going to do? They're going to start to come up with super irrational viewpoints. Correct. Of this person wants to hurt me. This person is, and then it manifests into actual physical violence.
Isn't it crazy how that happens?
Man, I've looked at, because I've as a kid I experienced, not necessarily me personally involved in that violence, although I have been as a kid abused. I didn't, with my parents, when they got into a fight, I didn't personally see it. But I was in the home when that happened.
Right.
Something like that happened. And so I could just tell you that that is something that, first of all, is never going to be good for a kid.
No, of course not.
And then something that kids blame themselves for. They'll be like, you never realize it until you're older if you've experienced something like that. Like, that's something that kids blame themselves for. And so one of the biggest reasons of divorce for people, I think, is that they experienced divorce in their family. Like, their parents split up. So you don't know what a home looks like, healthy home. From what you're telling me, you guys, your parents, I'm sure you could see that they loved each other, right?
Of course, yeah.
And so you got to see that. How has it affected? What have been the challenges, right? Because everybody's relationships is different. Mm-hmm. What have been challenges for you? You're married, right?
Correct.
Have you experienced any challenges? And if so, what have been some for you?
Well, I think just like any, relationship, especially when you're starting off, like one of our biggest and really only issues that we've ever had was just like financial, because like, especially like keep in mind, me and my wife, Jessica, we got together pretty much like right out of high school. And we pretty much are still together to this day now. So I know when we were first getting together and we, we ended up moving in together. My parents were like not really on board with the idea, right? Because they thought that we were too young. They thought we were too young, that we didn't know what we were getting into, right? And this and that. But I mean, here we are, years later, kind of like proving them wrong, because basically, my parents, they were kind of like against it again, because I was too young. I didn't know what I was getting into and stuff. Even to the point where like, my dad was kind of like, not necessarily like threatening me, because I wouldn't take it as a threat, but he was kind of like giving me like an eye opener. He's like, well, just keep in mind, like, if down the road, if you, get into like a hardship, you basically, for lack of words, he was like, don't count on me for any like financial assistance, basically. So I was like, so that kind of like hurt me, because like up until that point, dude, like I as much as I can recall, I always had my parents always had my back with everything. So that was like my first like actual time that like I felt like I didn't have the support of my parents, and that for me, that killed me, dude. Yeah, that killed me, because I lived my life basically to honor my family, because, of everything that they've done for me. It's like the least I can do is be able to like, give them the thanks back. Right. So at that point I felt like, my relationship with my parents kind of like dwindled a little bit, because I wasn't kind of like following as what they wanted. It wanted me to basically, go to college right away, be, something, right. And then live my life a little bit easier than what they did, is what they always wanted me to do. While yes, I had the idea of going to college, I wanted to pursue like a career in criminal justice. Something about wanting to go into the military first was always something that I wanted to get out of the way first. I figured, because if I wanted to go into college and study criminal justice, what the idea of being like LE or being a cop or whatever, right? I felt that having that in my background as being a Marine would make me appeal more than other candidates per se, right?
How did they? So then you mentioned that they wanted you to go to college. Then, so were they already upset with you that you didn't do that and you went into the Marine Corps? How did they feel about that?
I think in a sense, yeah, they kind of were, because so keep in mind, like as far like again, I said it before, like I'm the first, I guess you can say like I would say I was the first kid in my dad's side of the family growing up, right? So my dad had this like big like aspiration basically for me to like be the first one in the whole family to go get a career or get some kind of a college education, and I think that was one thing I kind of like kind of low key regret, because I know my dad worked his ass off to be able to get me to a school and this and that, and I had like a lot of like opportunities lined up to go to school, right? Because I had ended up getting like a pretty decent offer from Western Illinois, and that was actually my top school choice to go to. I had gotten accepted to that by them and a whole bunch of other colleges and stuff. But and in the day, like I just had like a crazy like sudden change in thought and heart, where like like I'm gonna put that to the side maybe just for a little bit, and then go into the military, whether it's like the reserves or active duty. I was kind of leaning back and forth between both, but then ultimately I was like, what? Why not have the best of both worlds, where I can potentially go to school, still see my family, still have somewhat of a relationship with everybody, and still live my long life dream of being a Marine. So that's where I ended up kind of going that like reserve route, so I can kind of get the best of both worlds. But then at the end of the day, like I ended up like doing none of that up until like now that, you know, I'm 27 and I'm trying to, you know, look at other opportunities now where I'm considering going back to school now too. So it's kind of weird how I kind of like did it like a whole 360 down the road. But I mean, would I go back and like necessarily change something? I don't think so, because to this point now, I'm happy, I'm content.
Because well, that's important because here's the thing: I would never have been able to live down not having tried going to become a Marine. Mm-hmm. I would have never lived that down. So I know that no matter what could have been in my path, no matter what else it could have done, this was the only path I was going to take. Right, yeah. Because if I didn't do it that way, I was going to regret it. And one of the things from the time I was very young, I wanted to not do things that I was going to regret later. Right. So, and one of those things is not trying things. Right. Because I can live with doing something and then having did everything I could to make it and then failed at it, but at least I attempted it. Right. Than having not known, okay, where do I stand? For sure. And so to your point, there was no other way that was going to happen, was then for you to do it other than that way, if you've already had it in your mind that you wanted to do this. For sure. And the only time you can do this is really young. Yeah. Because if you would have done it the reverse route and you would have waited till you were 27 to be like, okay, I think I'm ready. I mean, this is a far more difficult challenge to go into boot camp at 27 years old and think that your body's going to hold up like it did when you were 18, 19 years old. It's, I don't even, it doesn't even, for me, I can't even run like I did 3 years ago. No, hell you know? Dude. Yeah, so your body takes a bigger punishment if you do it older, because you're going to take a little bit longer to recover, a little bit longer to heal from any potential injuries if you do get injuries in boot camp, which are very likely. So it couldn't have happened any other way than young, because if you were going to figure out whether or not you could do it, you had to do it when you were at your best. And that's when you're 18, 19 years old. So
not to say though that you can't do it though, because I remember in my boot camp platoon, we had this recruit. His name was Devore, and he was, I kid you not, I think 30 or 32, something like that.
That's crazy.
30 or 32, and this guy was like full on family, wife, brand new kid at home and stuff, and he just said, fuck it, I'm gonna join the Marine Corps. And I think it's up until this day, I think he's still in, if I'm not mistaken.
To your point, that's not it's not. I had guys that were like 27, 28 years old too, up in that age, right? but they had a harder time.
For sure, you don't bounce back the same.
The same. Yeah. So in boot camp, there's a game of you're playing a game of chance, because I was just fortunate enough that the injuries that I took, I could still manage, right, and get through the obstacles and get through the training. Some people just got unlucky and they were older, or they were just unlucky and they were still really young. I had one guy that was, this is a story that always upsets me. I hope I get to talk to him someday. There's a recruit that was my next door neighbor, so to speak. Mm-hmm. He had, his rack was next to mine. Right. And he was 17 when he enlisted. I don't know if he was 18 by the time he got to boot camp, but he was young. Mm-hmm. And so super quiet, super humble kid. He didn't yell at people. He was just the most calm human I've ever met. For sure. And so I never really saw him super stressed. I did see him worried when he got injured, because he tore his hamstring on the hikes when we were second phase. Okay. So when we went up to Pendleton, we did all those hikes to build up to the Crucible, which is the final culminating event. Yes. And he had torn his hamstring 25% the first time. And so that was enough for him to get dropped, and he got dropped for, I want to say like maybe a month or two, because he came to see us when we graduated. When we came back, well, not graduated, he came back to see us when we came back from the Crucible. Okay. He was in what is it called? MRP? MRP, yeah. And he came and visited us and was like congratulating us, and I was like, hey man, I really hope you make it. Like, we'll be looking out for you and see if you. And so when he got dropped the first time, I saw him, like, the defeat on his face. Like I could see he was like holding back tears. And so I chatted with him and I told him like, this is something that it's just a setback. Like it's just something that for whatever reason is happening right now. And, I didn't have the right words at the time, but I told him like, I know you can do it.
For sure.
Like if anybody can do it, it's you. I try to motivate him and so he got dropped. And when he came to visit us, I chatted with him again and I was like, he was like, hey, like, great job and I'm proud of you and all that stuff. And it was emotional for me because that if anybody deserved to be a Marine, it was that guy.
Yeah. Because
he didn't complain. He just did what he was told to do.
For sure.
Didn't get into arguments, didn't cause any trouble. He was just like a good human. And he had the will.
Yeah.
That was just another thing that I described. He had the spirit to be a Marine. And so if anybody deserved it, it was him. So I found out later that he picked back up with another platoon about like, I don't know, a month or two later, and he tore it 50%. And so at that point they were like, you're done.
Yeah.
They sent him home. And so that was, I had a chat with him when I was in comm school because I found out once I was in comm school that he was home. But I didn't know that. So I messaged him and I was like, hey, like, how's everything going? Yeah. And so he told me and I was like, man, I don't like, what do I say to him? Because he deserved it.
Right.
So I was like, I didn't have the right words for him.
For sure.
So I hope that I talk to that guy one day. I'll try to find him, but he deserved to be a Marine.
And you know what? It kind of like touching base on that, like, because I remember like had a bunch, like my platoon, when we first started off, we had like maybe roughly like 105, maybe 10 recruits roughly. And I think I ended up graduating with like 49 or 48. So like almost less than half. Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I remember a bunch would, they get dropped for, medical reasons and stuff like that. And then same thing, they would come up to our graduation, say, hey, congratulations, wish you the best of luck and stuff. And honestly, bro, it's so hard not to feel bad. Yeah. Why? Because like, I don't know if you can relate to this, or I would think everybody can in a sense, right? Like from the moment that you step foot on those yellow footprints, bro, like an instant bond happens with that receiving platoon. Right. And I don't know what it is, if it's because like, we're all like fresh out of high school, like 18, 19-year-olds. What?
I have an answer for you. I had that same question.
Yeah.
It's probably not the healthiest thing, but it is. I think it is playing. It does play a role. It's a trauma bond.
Yeah. And I was gonna lean towards that, dude, because it's like you're obviously like, for example, like me per se, right? Like I never grew up in a household where like I was getting yelled at, smacked around, and shit like that, right? Like if I would get smacked around, I'd be out in the streets and I would smack them back, right? Obviously, defend yourself at all costs, right? But it wasn't until like you got to boot camp where like, fuck, do I regret this right now? Like signing those papers? Do I really want to be here right now? Fuck yeah, I want to be here. So. And like how you said, it's that trauma bond, because it's like, all right, fuck, if the drill instructor goes ham on me and starts whacking me, I will hope one of you two has the balls to step in and say, hey, that's a little too much, senior, or something. But obviously that's not really ever gonna happen, right? But I think you said it perfectly. It's that trauma bond that gets us going.
It's because like it sucks to go through boot camp.
Oh fuck yeah, dude!
But it sucks a little less knowing that everybody else around you is also going through it. So it's like, these people understand me.
Right.
And that's what the trauma bond is.
Yes.
Is like, these people know what I'm going through.
Bro, and like, I know a lot of people will probably watch this and like, what the fuck are they talking about? But dude, you it's like one of those things where like, you have to like experience it in order to like fully understand it. Cause obviously like you have like small snip and little tastes, like whether it's like movies, Call of Duty and all this and that. But honestly, nothing is like as close as it is when you're actually in it and like actually per se living it,
But the good thing is that it doesn't, it starts possibly, I think that most of them start as that of like, damn, this sucks, but this person's also going through it. So they get me. So we form a bond, but it evolves.
Yes.
And I think that that's something that is noting, because there's both sides of that coin.
Yeah.
Because it starts out that way, but it evolves into, this unbreakable family type bond of like, you know me because you've seen me at my worst.
Yes.
So you know me.
For sure.
And so that's why the bond evolves, because you get to see all sides of that person. You get to see their best, their worst, and boot camp brings it out of you. If you ever want to find out what demons you have hiding in your mind, go do something like that. Yeah. Go do something that challenges you mentally and physically, and you're around other people. You're gonna find out what your demons are. You're gonna find out what your worst, what you react like when you're not in control.
And can I touch a little base on that too?
Go for it.
When it comes to like, the whole boot camp situation too, obviously, we all have like per se our demons and stuff like that too, right? So in a sense, it kind of is in a sense controlling, because maybe at, when we're developing those kind of things, especially at a young age, I mean, me per se, when I was in school, I as much as I see it now per se, when I was going in school back in the day, it was hardly ever, talked or mentioned about mental health just in general, right? Not even like in health sciences, right? Like when it came to mental, like, health and stuff like that, the only thing I vaguely ever remember hearing was just like depression, anxiety, and like, the common five or whatever, right? But as far as like, like past traumas and stuff like that, they don't really, associate that with, necessarily mental trauma or mental health, right? But what I was trying to get at with this is the fact that, like, obviously, while we all may deal with our own independent things, and it, in a sense, does control us to a certain extent, going through, like how you say, challenging yourself and going through like something like a boot camp, right? It will help you, release all that, and you don't really realize, how much, how capable you are of, oneself to actually be able to go out and, do things. For me, for example, what really took the spin on me was the whole confidence course. For me. That was like the big, like, oh shit, if I can get through this, dude, everything else is gonna be a breeze.
Right.
Especially when you had to go on the fucking rope.
Sure.
And you had to like just rappel yourself across it.
Yeah.
Pray you don't fucking fall down, dude. That to me, and then the fucking the Stairway to Hell.
Yeah.
Stairway to Heaven. Stairway to Heaven, yeah. Like that, those two for me, it's just like, bruh, if I can get through this, dude, everything else is just a fucking walk in the park, dude. Because that for me, like, obviously, I'm not good with heights. If I know me, as I clearly just said it right now, I'm not good with heights, dude. I am not good with heights. But that for me, like, definitely took it, like if I was afraid of heights, like to this degree, like now, like to this degree, I'm like, okay, maybe I might be a little iffy right here, but like anything from here and below, like fuck it, whatever.
Yeah.
It is what it is, But it also gives you that sense of ability that, hey, like if you control what's going up in here, like, you will be surprised as how much you're able to actually accomplish in your everyday lives. And I think that's one thing that, like, I would like to see, moving on forward. And I think, to in a sense, like now, I mean, you can probably pick it up on it too. Like, we're kind of seeing a little bit more of mental health being addressed. And I say that because I see that in my work a lot too. Like now we're like, instead of just, calling an ambulance and like say like somebody's having a mental health crisis and just calling them an ambulance and send them into like a psych ward or something like that. Now they're being, they're responding. The first responders are coming out with like, what do you call it? Counselors, to the point.
Interesting.
Now, yeah. So there's a new program, at least in my area where I'm working at, it's called COAST, and it's abbreviation for what? I'm not too sure. I can probably get the answer for you later. But basically, it's like a bunch of like PSAPs in my area. They've basically collaborated with a bunch of like psychiatrists and counselors and stuff like that. That if there is a person that's deemed like a danger, where it's not necessarily like per se like life threatening to like the immediate public, but
like danger to themselves.
Yep. Exactly, right. They can potentially respond out with crisis counselors. So instead of like necessarily like. Because like unfortunately like from maybe even like I don't know, from like our point from high school, but before, like mental health crisis wasn't really like a necessarily an issue. Like now they even call it a pandemic or an epidemic, excuse me. Yeah. Which is good because now that can afford the government to give local municipalities more funding to be able to start these kind of resources like how we're doing now. So in a sense, it's kind of been more beneficial because you're addressing the issue rather than just putting a Band-Aid over it, right? And then what's tending to happen prior to is just you would send these people off to the hospital. They'd get put on a 72-hour hold, and then they suppress their shit with medications. It's like, dude, that's only gonna help you out to a certain degree.
Right.
Nothing's gonna really. There's no real solution than to going at the main source. It's figuring out what it is. So having that as a program now and seeing like the results of it, it's phenomenal. And to me, like, I think it's more of a long-term solution versus a short-term solution, right? And a lot of the times it's just like, first responders go out, they're like, oh, I got to deal with this other guy. That's crazy, right? And I was like, all right, how can I quickly go about this so I can go back on the road and not deal with this? Mm-hmm. So typically that was always the route. Just call an ambulance, send it to the hospital, done deal, report end.
And then just to clarify, your line of work is dispatch, right?
Yes, 911 dispatch, yeah.
And so you get to hear about all kinds of calls, all kinds of situations, whether it's physical violence or mental breakdowns, and so you're now getting to see the adaptations. Yes, because I talked to you might be interested if you find out that I had a chat with a trauma therapist. We were doing like a meet and greet thing for the podcast, and that's how I usually set up set up episodes with other people that are not from my immediate group. Is we do discovery calls and we have chats, and so that's new, by the way. That's something that we're just starting to do, so we can get outside of this this group. And so I had a chat with like a couple weeks ago, and he told me that so what's going on right now, what you're noticing is that basically mental health, generational trauma has pushed the mental health of us as a society to its breaking point. So one thing that I had learned, generational trauma has been a big topic on this podcast and for me in my life. And so that's something that we've been kind of delving into. And I found through him, I've never heard anybody explain it this way. And it's, of course, like you think about it, you're like, absolutely, it makes 100% sense. He goes, well, so generational trauma isn't just that your dad's dad passed on his his insecurities or his issues. He built upon what was handed to him. So if there was generational trauma from his dad, he passed that on. He added to it and then passed it on to you. So that's what's happening. It's not just the passing of that specific thing, of that generational trauma. It's adding his trauma to it, his response to it, and then giving it to you.
So it's almost kind of like a norm.
It's a compounding effect.
Yeah.
And so what's happened is now this generation has had such a serious amount of just a snowball that has built over generation that hasn't been able to deal with it because they've had to literally try to survive, and that was like their goal. And so they accomplished that and didn't get to deal with everything that came from that survival. Yeah. And so now this generation that has that ability to, well, not ability to, but we have to deal with it now because society has come to a mental breaking point. Mm-hmm. And so we have to acknowledge it. We have to turn and face that snowball that has turned into this boulder. And now we have to try to figure out how to break it up, or at least how to manage it so it doesn't smash us. Right. Because we're at a point where if we don't deal with it, it's going to completely smash our ability to live, to be able to manage life. And so that's what you're seeing is the incorporation of that, of realizing we have to do something. We can't not do something. No. And that's what's happening. And so I know just for time, I want to kind of give you a chance to basically let me know how things are. We left off about some issues that you were having, or some things that you were dealing with your wife, and what challenges you have had with your parents. Can you tell me how that has evolved to today? Like, when did your parents become more comfortable with?
So honestly, like, I don't really think my parents started like really like, I think up until the point, basically until me and Jess got married, like through church, where they like still kind of like iffy or kind of like in denial, like, is this going to work? Is this not? Yada, yada. Right. But I don't think it was until that, we got married in Mexico and through church, that they actually kind of like, okay, this is, happening, kind of have to accept it or whatever the case is, but they kind of like seeing that like, okay, I can kind of like handle myself per se. Yeah. Right. In a sense, for me, that was like uplifting. That was great because up until that moment, basically, I felt like I was just like for lack of words, a disappointment to my family. I felt kind of like not necessarily like ashamed or like like embarrassed, but like I just felt bad that I knew my parents wanted me to do more, but I decided to do my own thing, right? And I think ultimately my parents, they just want me to see me happy and successful. And I think a lot of the stuff that because of how they were, it motivated me to ensure that, right? Because I remember, like I told you before, like when I first got with Jessica, my dad basically was like, don't count on us for like any like help, financial, whatever the case is. So that to me, that was kind of like heartbreaking, obviously, because it's like shit. Like if I do come to like a fucking like some kind of dead end, like who do I go to, right?
Did you ever have a chat with your dad about that comment?
I want to say I have, but there might be a slight chance I haven't,
because it's happened, right? But the way, and this is just my opinion, right? And let me reiterate that you having been hurt by something doesn't mean that your parents are bad or that they intended anything bad.
No, and I know that because like I've even up into this day now, like recently I've had some like car issues, right? Where like I got into like a crash or whatever. And I'm grateful that like in Justice family, they love me and I love them just as much. And they've helped me, tremendously a lot towards like the last years, especially me, us being together. I can't tell you how much they've helped me out, like so much. And like, I'm forever under that.
Yeah.
And to include my parents too, they built me out on a couple of things too, but that's just like, I know in the moment, maybe because my dad wasn't, per se like okay with what I was doing. Maybe that was just way of like, all right, maybe if I say this, that'll maybe have him like second guess and like have him come back. Right. But in the end of the day, it's like, especially like as a kid, right? Like once you have like, it's kind of like almost like your career, right? Like once you're like, you want something, you're going to do whatever it takes to kind of like make sure you get to that.
Right.
In a sense, like how you were, like when you were at a certain age, you wanted to, be a Marine and you would, prepare yourself at whatever means necessary to get to that point. Right. And that's no different to my situation too. So like my parents would say like, they weren't going to support me or whatever, this and that. And while, yeah, that kind of hurt, but that also gave me like the feel, the energy to want to prove them wrong in a sense. And to this point and to this day now where I'm grateful that I didn't take it in like such a negative way, but I won't lie. I did kind of like disconnect a little bit.
No. So here's the thing though. So that was your resilience, by the way. I just want to make that clear.
Yeah.
That was your resilience that made you adapt and go, I need to really make sure I'm put together. And that's I want to make sure that you are able to give yourself the credit that was your resilience that got you through that. And so it's okay. Your parents are not doing things to hurt you intentionally, and we need to acknowledge that
For sure.
But also at the same time, something that happened, you have a right to say that hurt me.
Yeah.
Right. Even if they didn't mean to do it, that's okay. I mean, my parents have done things to me that I've said to them that hurt me.
Right.
And it's not my responsibility to make sure that they're okay with me being hurt.
Right. Yeah.
You know what
you mean. Yeah. Yeah.
So like, it's okay for you to approach your dad if there was ever a time, and this is for healing purposes too, of like, hey, when you said this was something that had hurt me. You don't have to do it, but I'm saying that you're not wrong for if you ever want to have that conversation with your dad.
I appreciate that.
And say, hey, this hurt me. And I think that, I really looked up to you and I wanted to make you proud. And so hearing that was hurtful. And that's okay to say that because your feelings are valid too.
For sure.
And the truth is they're human beings, your parents. So I realized that you go through a phase where most people who are close to their parents probably don't go through a heavy enough phase or a super heavy phase of, not heavy enough, but a super heavy phase of demonizing. But it goes, you idolize your parents as a kid. As a teenager, you start to demonize them as you start to see the flaws. And then that typically I've noticed people get stuck in my family in the demonize. So they're not who I thought they were. And so they must be bad. They're bad people. And they get stuck in the demonize. And if you don't work your way if you don't heal that part,
right,
you will never get to the humanize part. Right. So you idolize, demonize, and then humanize.
And I'm glad you say that, because that's kind of giving me like a little bit more of like, you know, some memories too. Cause like, obviously, like, you know, like I said before, me, my pops, especially, to include in this conversation, my parents, and we were always super close. Right. So I remember like, you know, my parents would always try to paint the picture. Like they wanted me to see them more as like a friend rather than just mom and dad. Right. To the point where like, if I fucked up and I did something, they would rather hear it from me than a knock on the door from the cop or something like that. Right. Like if I got into something, they would rather hear it come from me than from somebody else. Right. So in that sense, like I always, you know, would see both of my parents equally as approachable. Right. So when all this happened, where like, you know, I started branching off and doing my own thing with my wife, and now, I know that for a fact there was a little bit of a disconnect between my parents and myself, mainly because, you know, they weren't necessarily, you know, in agreement with, you know, what was going on, but at the same time they thought I was, you know, too like naive as to what the real world was, right? And obviously, like I know, like, you know, because, you know, I went through this phase too, and I'm sure every, you know, adolescent at this point, you know, would too. But we get to that point like right around like senior year of high school, especially right out of there, where like, oh, like I know the world, like I can, like, you know, my parents, they don't know shit, you know, like, you know, they're just trying to like,
they're outdated. They don't know what life is like now.
Yes, they try to keep you in that like safe bubble. And don't get me wrong, I appreciate and I love my parents for that, right? Because they always want to, you know, take care of, you know, their family, right? But I remember like, you know, kind of like going back to that, like, you know, my parents, I would always see them, you know, being like this, like helping hand, especially to like the rest of my immediate family, right? Like if there was like some sort of, you know, like discrepancy or like some struggle or whatever, my parents would help out however they can, right? And, you know, they would always kind of like preach that as a value, you know, always take care of family, because family is all you have left, right? In the end of the day, you can have plenty of friends, you can have a million friends. And I kind of like, you know, can personally relate to this in a sense, because not to my own horn, but I was kind of like, you know, well known in high school because of ROTC, the sports, and all the clubs that I was in. I was fairly known. Like I didn't necessarily know everybody up on a first name basis, but everybody knew me, and my wife would always say that too. You know, so to go from like having a whole bunch of friends, basically my whole senior year, my whole senior class, which was like one of like the biggest classes in my high school. Actually, it was like about like 1,000 students basically. To go from like having that many peers to like really only having like as many as I can count on my hand is kind of like crazy, right? So in a sense, like, you know, that kind of like had me think back to what my parents would say too. It's like there's nothing like family, you know, like nobody's gonna have you like family, right? So for me to have that in the back of my head, and then when I go off and venture to do my own thing, thinking that it's okay, right? Because at some point we all have to spread our wings and, you know, do our own thing, right? So I would agree that maybe I was maybe a bit too young. Am I regretful? No, I want to make that clear. I'm not regretful, because I do love my wife. Yeah. I love her to this day. While she's not perfect, and I by no means am not perfect. But what I was trying to get at is the fact that they would say that, you know, they'll always have my back, whatever the case is. And then when I first got, you know, with Jessica, and then I had my financial struggles or whatever, and I would try to reach out, I had like a lot of pride to want to ask them for help, because of how things kind of started off right away off the bat, where like my dad was like, you know, I'm not going to help you out and this and that. So in a sense, like where I could have progressed a little more, I didn't, because I had that pride in me to want to prove my parents, especially my dad. I wanted to prove him wrong, that, okay, like, yeah, like I know I'm going to, like, as I knew like in the beginning I was going to struggle, right? Because like, you know, compared to, if you were to compare our life now, me and my wife's, to when we first started off, bro, we've moved miles, you know, because obviously we all got to start from somewhere, right? So I remember when we first bought our first car, and we were like, you know, trying to figure out how we're going to, you know, get from job to job. And we made the decision, all right, fuck it, we'll work at the same spot, so that way we can get around the same hours. and be able to just carpool together. Or if there's days like you're off and I got to work, I'll just take the car or whatever. And we kind of just started building our empire like that to the point now where, we're way in a much better position now. But even then, like, there's still, some hiccups that happen along the way where, shit, like, you might need an extra lending hand and stuff like that. And that's where, per se, family will usually kick in. And now to this day now, though, like, to kind of like clarify things though, like I have gotten, I've crossed that bridge of being prideful, because my wife would also kind of like check me on it too. She's like, if you have family and they're going to, and they can potentially help you out, why not reach out to them, And in a sense, like I tell like, well, it's like, I tell her my story. And she's like, well, you're never going to really have like, build a even closer relationship if you don't even try.
Can I give you my opinion?
For sure.
I think, and this I think we'll end it with this because I want to be respectful.
Oh no,
of
you're
time.
good. We still have some time. You're good.
How much time you got?
Can you go till like 4:30, bro?
4:30?
Yeah.
Okay. So here's my opinion. Okay. So I used to think that pride, because I would call myself for a long time I would call myself prideful.
Okay.
What it really was a fear of rejection. So if I don't feel safe to ask you for help, then I'm afraid that if I ask you for help, you'll reject it. And so what I would call pride was actually fear, was me being afraid to be rejected. And so I would rather struggle than to experience my parents rejecting me.
And I get that. Yeah. Cause like, I feel like in a sense too, that was like my thing too, cause it's like the fear, like, okay, if I had like if I was in a financial pitch and I went up to my pop and like, hey, can you possibly help me out? The fact that he says no and I'm still fucked, I'm like, all right, well,
then you have to look at yourself, and there's that inner kid. And this is what through the few years I've been in therapy, I've been able to pick up, is that a lot of times that inner kid comes out, because at the end of the day, like everybody has that inner kid. It never goes away. And I think that's one of the biggest superpowers you can have as a person is to integrate that younger self into who you are today.
For sure. Yeah.
And so that kid can still come out and still be a kid. Right. Because that never leaves you. Like that's a part of you forever.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest mistakes we make as a society is to say, grow up, like in terms of when you're experiencing emotions that are like that younger kid, like everybody as a human, everybody wants to be accepted. Everybody wants to be loved.
Right.
And so that's that inner kid.
And that's so true, bro. Cause like you said it perfectly, because I'm thinking back to just recently my birthday. Right. So obviously, like, I grew up, my parents, like, my birthday would come around, they throw me my birthday parties, whatever the case is. Right. And then obviously it came to a point now where I, moved out, did my own thing. And then I didn't really have that, those same, like, memories like it was back in the day. Right. And it wasn't until, again, this year that I had, my birthday had passed and my mom had invited me over, and she's like, just come over and have like, we made some food or whatever. So my uncles and some of my aunts got together and they all came over. And then it was kind of like a low-key little surprise where like they ended up like celebrating my birthday. They brought out a cake and stuff like that, saying happy birthday. And I don't know why, dude, but like I ended up getting like, I got hit with a wave of emotions. And it was like kind of like reliving that, how you said, that little kid, and you were like thinking about like my parents, throwing me, birthday parties and stuff like that. Cause again, like from high school up until now, 27, I didn't really have that, and if it wasn't possible because of work, and I think that's only one thing that I do kind of like regret to myself, but to a certain degree, is that I missed out on a lot of like, family time because of work, but also too, like, I guess my way of like coping with it is the fact that like, I know like I'm working because, I'm trying to get somewhere in life. I'm trying to put my family, when I say family, me and my wife, right?
Yeah.
Like get us to a better, situation than we're currently at right now, especially, with my wife going to school and she's doing her thing, right? I have to, kind of like try to make sure everything's in good order, make sure everything's, taken care of. Cause in the end of the day, like kind of like how my dad would tell me, right? He would say, growing up, you should see school as your full-time job. Because I remember like when I was 17, 18, I was so like thirsty about getting a job, whether it's like part-time and stuff like that. I was telling my dad, like, I want to get a job, I want to get some money and this and that, so I can, blow it on little cleats, balls, whatever the case is for sports and shit, right? Or, at the time, my girlfriend's, right, just towards the tail end of that, take her out for dinner, whatever the case is, right? But my dad would be like, no, you worry about school, that's your full-time job. So then having those, words instilled in me at a young age, I kind of passed that on to Just now too, where the fact is like, you're going to college, you're going to university, right? That should be, all you should worry about. Because she would try, working on the weekends or days that she has free, still work and stuff like that. But I'm like, dude, you're killing yourself. Why? Because you're going to work for whether it's 4, 6, 8 hours, whatever the case is, right? And then still have to work on this paper, get this, worksheet done in time, or this PowerPoint, and collaborating with other students. And she had like 4, maybe, 3 classes at the time too. So it was just too much for her to balance at one point. Mm-hmm. So I would always tell her like, hey, like, just worry about school, and I would take care of everything financially. Right. So in a sense, for me, there was a long period of time where like, I didn't really have a choice but to like just work, because, when I first started off, I wasn't making the crazy amount of money. But now, thanks to, myself, that I've been in this career for the longest now, and obviously, every year you get a boost in pay, I've gotten to a point now where like I'm able to like, okay, step back a little bit and not necessarily do all this overtime all the time, right? I've gained seniority now where like I have 2 people below me and they can take the overtime versus me. And then now like I really kind of like worry about per se is just the quality time that me and Just have, right? Because I know we spend a lot of time, working, opposite schedules. Because basically from the point that I got out of high school until now, basically I've always worked third shift. Mm-hmm. So I would never see family. I would hardly see Jess. It'd always be highs and buys, because she would obviously work in the morning, like first shift. So she'd leave like at 8 or 7, depending on her classes sometimes too. So it would always be like highs and buys. And then it would always be worse when I had like additional overtime and I had to work like at 2 in the afternoon, mm-hmm. or hang back until 10 a.m. and work like 16. So it's like, it was no necessarily real quality time. Right. And then like, I never really had the seniority to be able to put in for days. So now this year, and I'm like so ecstatic for it, but this year's gonna be the first year ever that I work a day shift, so I'll be working from like 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And in occasions that if there is overtime, which kind of happens here and there on day shift, I would have to hang over till like 10 p.m. Mm. So it's not as bad, where I can still get home, still see Jess, because Jess is a night owl regardless, right? Because she would always be up studying or whatever. So she goes to bed late anyways, but I told her, like, now that I'm going to be going on day shift, she's all excited about it too, right? We're going to have to adjust that a little bit, because I'm like, by like midnight at the latest, I'm going to have to be in bed, dude, because like I got to be up at, 4, 3 in the morning to get to work and stuff, Yeah. So, but dude, I'm excited for it, because like even per se, like I never really realized that too, because like where I'm at now, like I this is my own personal opinion, right? Like I don't like my management per se, my immediate admin. They, they claim that they know the job, but they don't. They've been in law enforcement and stuff like that, but as an actual call taker dispatcher, they've never actually done that. So now,
what do you mean by admin? What do they do?
So admin, as far as like my boss's boss. Okay. So he's like a director of like what's called support services. So he's like in charge of like public works, the civilians like me, and nothing like LE or FD. Okay. Right? So he's in charge of everything else, civilian. So city hall, this and that, blah, blah, blah. And he per se, he's always been LE. So he started as a PO, and then worked his way up to, like administration, whether it's like, say he was like a deputy chief, right? Okay. So he's only known police. So then now that he became, civilian, he retired from LE. They gave him a civilian position at the same place. Now he's in charge of us. So because he's been in LE, and he's obviously like, picked up a radio and said, copy dispatch or whatever, he thinks that he knows what dispatch entails or what our jobs entail, which is nothing like how the movies or the TV shows portray.
Can you describe the difference in the world?
What do you mean?
In the world of law enforcement and dispatch? Because there's going to be a difference.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously, like the best way I can put it is starting off with LE, right? So as a police officer, right, you get the call or a radio, right? Hey, respond to a domestic in progress, whatever, with weapons or whatever the case is, right? So they are given a like a little quick briefing,
Okay.
as to what the situation is, what's going on, just a quick summary of what's going on, and then they actually go to the scene and they would be the ones dealing with it. Whatever's happening, that's on them completely now. So they have to deal with it as best as they can. For me, I'm dealing with just hearing all this, right? So in a sense, I'm just visualizing everything that's going on in my head, that's going on in the room, right? So I have to think about, okay, who's all involved? Did anybody that was involved leave? Is anybody have any weapons? Is anybody at risk? This and that. So I'm playing all these millions of scenarios in my head, right? Versus an officer, they just get told what I've already handled myself, and now they just have to deal with whatever like breadcrumbs are left, right? So they don't really have to necessarily deal with the quit asking all these stupid ass questions. Just get them over here now. I'm quitting, and like, all this other, bullshit, right? So then they hang up on you. Having to call back and, try to get more information, right? Because they didn't give us the address. And I'm like, all right. So, and if it's an apartment building, trying to figure all that out. So they don't really have to ever deal with uncooperative callers. Mm-hmm. And that's always like the worst to deal with, unfortunately, because I understand, like, when one's in an emergency, their adrenaline is sky high, right? And that takes the best of them sometimes, right? And they don't, they kind of like, get disconnected with reality. Obviously, like we'll get a phone call from somebody asking for an ambulance, right? And then they hang up 30 seconds later. I called you guys 2 minutes ago. Where are you guys at? Blah, blah, blah. Ma'am, it's only been like literally less than a minute. Like, chillax, we're coming.
Yeah.
We can't just, I always love telling them, like, we can't just teleport, we can't just teleport, man. We it's drive time,
Right.
It's drive time. So,
I haven't heard that one.
Yeah. It's like, man, we can't just teleport, it takes us time to, fucking get in our rigs and,
right.
Get out there and X, Y, and Z and everything like that. Right. So, so sometimes, people can get a little disconnected with, the reality of things, right? And we're like, okay, they want things like done now, but it's like, okay, well, I'm still on the phone call. We've only been on the phone call for 30 seconds. And usually, like, if it's like a medical call or something like that, the way technology has advanced, it's amazing. When I first started off in my small municipality, we had to do everything manually. So if say you're calling me for help and you want an ambulance, say, someone cut themselves or whatever, they need an ambulance, they're bleeding out, right? So I'm getting all the information started, like, who you are, the address, X, Y, and Z. And at the same time, I'm going to tell them, hey, stand by for a second. Let me get the rescue started. And I got to do like the manual tones and speak to the firehouse and say, hey, you ambulance, blah, 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 is due for such case at blah, 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 blah. And I repeat it twice. And then I would go back with the caller and do what's called pro QA, which is basically like first aid over the phone. So whether it's like someone choking, someone's in shot, stab, whatever the case is, seizures, I would have a program that basically gives me like line by line, like, okay, what's going on? And then they tell me what's going on. And then based off of the results that they give me, it gives me a certain response where it's like, okay, I need to now send an engine, right? So if it's like a person that's epileptic, has known seizure disorders, right? And now, shit's gone bad where like maybe it consumed something, right? And maybe potential overdose now. Mm-hmm. They may have, taken 2 of their medications versus 1. Right. So now that can potentially,
you have to figure out what has happened. What have they done so far? You have to paint a picture.
Yes, exactly.
Right. And so then what do you think is the law enforcement officer that you're saying is admin? What do you think that he's not getting?
The fact that, like, per se, like, he thinks that he can come in and just pick up a headset and just do our job when he's never actually done it. And he claims that, like, oh, like, dispatch, is like, long story short, you would say, like, that it's so easy, when it comes to like us asking for like, additional resources, he would kind of like find, every reason to not give it to us. Right. Mm-hmm. So when it's like, okay, but you're not the one that's, in this, place every single day, you're only, working upstairs in your nice fancy office Monday through Friday.
You're not talking to these people.
You're not talking to these people. You're not actually actively involved with the process. Mm-hmm. You're just supervising the process. Right. And so when we ask for things or stuff like that, whether it's like better systems or better upgrades and stuff like that, it's like, because, obviously all our job is on PCs, right? And a lot of the PCs that we had now, they were like very outdated to the point now where like our systems, we'd be in the middle of like giving like life safety instructions and our systems would crash. And it's like, bro, like they don't realize this, but every time that I pick up a phone call, the moment that I pick up and say 911 and introduce myself, I am liable for those 2 minutes, 3 minutes, however long the call is. If something goes wrong, I can get sued, as long as well as the department, right? But at the end of the day, like I can still potentially lose my job, get sued, go to jail for what the case is, right? So everything is like very line by line. It's very strict. And then for him to kind of come in and like kind of like laugh all about it, it's like, oh, like you guys have it easy.
So you feel like he looks down on you?
Yeah, yeah. And I'm not the only one. Everybody is the same way too. And to be kind of clear, like the whole community, as far as like the whole village, like everybody doesn't like him to a certain degree, just because of the way he carries himself, his persona, and everything like that. It's like he only like, what do you call it? Like he only looks out for his homies, the people that been in with him in the administration that are still like, you know, somewhat in admin. He kind of looks out after them, but like us, the low guys that are in the trenches, like doing everything, you know, it's like, you know, he can care less, you know.
I think the issue here is like there's a lack of understanding that this is a team effort.
Absolutely.
And that by hurting you guys, he's actually hurting police officers as well, because then you can't give the information they need to do their job.
Yeah.
And so it's a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah.
And I think that that's important to be able to understand how they link, and how you can be a detriment if you don't have the resources you need for that police officer who doesn't have information they need because your system crashed, and it's just this domino effect.
Yeah.
Right.
So in like in a sense, like, yeah, like, you know, we'll still do with, you know, with what we got, right? Because that's all we have. But that's why, you know, kind of like on the Marines, there's always a backup to everything, right? So like, you know, while everything, yes, is now digital and it's on the computer, we do have like, you know, manual cards that we can just, system crashes, fuck it, we'll grab out the cards and just pick up where we started and everything, where we left off. But things are changing now to a degree, because like when I first started off at my small municipality, we consolidated like a year after I got on, and then now I've been at this place for about 4 or 5 years. And I'm sorry, 4 years, and we're gonna go through that process again. So we're gonna have to consolidate, where basically my county is gonna go to another big, massive center, and instead of having like, you know, this city has their own dispatch center, this city has this dispatch center that does the dispatch services for these towns, and this center does it for these towns. Everything's just gonna go into one big building, one big municipality, or one big center. Sorry. So basically, we're gonna have to, like, you know, kind of leave and reapply, and it's not gonna be like, okay, those that are on right now, if you guys want a job, just lateral over. We have to basically
get re-interviewed,
reapply, and everything like that. And it's crazy because it's like there is like, I don't know if you know too much about, you know, call takers, but there's a big crisis in the call taking community, because there is a big shortage in call takers, right? So there's a lot of centers, and it's not just here in Illinois, but all across the nation.
I've heard of it,
where there's a massive, you know, like need for call takers, right? Because it's not, quite simple, it's not the easiest job. Once you get the foundation and the basis down, it can be an easy job, you know, just with the experience and stuff like that. And especially if you have a good crew, you know, it's because in this job, it's all about teamwork. Because it's me and 2 other guys or girls, combination of either or. And we each handle our own town. So it's kind of crazy to think that like one person really, it's really 3, right? But for the most part, it's just one person is in charge of like 20,000+ people, right? So like if there's like an overflow of calls, somebody who's not busy, they'll take that call too, and they'll help me out in a sense. But like, you know, if you think about it, like if there is like, you know, a structure fire in one town, there's a shooting in one town, and then like we also cover like a marina, so like up by Lake Michigan. So, and there's like a water rescue in another town, dude, like that is like the worst night ever, because then like we're like so short of like manpower, because like everything, you know, every call for the most part roughly lasts like about like an hour or so, as far as like, you know, you actively interacting with, you know, officers, firefighters, whatever the case is. The medical side will last roughly about an hour, but you know, then you get like, you know, other bullshit in the mix and stuff too. So you guys still attend to that too and stuff like that. So it can be kind of like, you know, draining in a sense, right?
Right.
And I would, and I would like to see more like, that being addressed at work too, because, it is a lot, especially like the amount of hours that they want us to cover. And then like sometimes, you got to think about it. We're still human in the day. I still want to be able to, enjoy my time off, with my wife and my family. But it never fails that like on my time off, I'll get called in to go to work. So it's like, dude, now it's like, it's kind of like been troubling finding that sense of balance sometimes between work and family, but looking forward to this year, that'll be on day shift where it's like, okay, if I have to go to work, say on someone's birthday, traditionally most parties won't start till like what, 5 or 6.
Right.
And I'm getting off right at that time. So the point where like I can, get off work, go straight there, hang out for a few hours. If it's like, the next day I do after work, I'm like, all right, hang out for a little bit, go home, sleep, and then go back to work the next day. Or if it's like one of those days where it's like, it's my Friday,
right,
I can stay a little bit longer, whatever the case is. But the point is like, I like the fact that I'll be able to be more connected and involved with my family versus, having to like, burn out like a vacation day. Like if I really want to be somewhere with family and it's like on a work day, I would have to, burn that day versus, now I can potentially just pull up after work, so
yeah.
I'm looking forward to that in that sense. And yeah, we'll see what happens, but it's been a while that I've been looking forward to this, and it's never been able to really work out in my favor just because of seniority and my time in service. But now that I have it, dude, I'm going for it. So that's awesome.
I'm happy to hear that for you. I want to talk to you about short-term goals.
Yeah,
we're headed into a new year.
Yep.
Okay, so what do you want to accomplish?
So definitely looking into a new career because I'm not trying to go through this consolidation again, because when I went through my first consolidation, it wasn't the most welcoming consolidation. So kind of going through this new one and like already seeing that there's a lot of like gray area and not a lot of transparency. And we've had to like ourselves, like as dispatchers, like our own little community have found out more information than the leadership is like, releasing to us. It's like, okay, there's no reason to be, not transparent. Right. So to me, if they're telling us that like one thing and we're finding out that it's actually another thing, that's already giving me like weird feelings where I'm like, you know what, I'm not trying to be a part of this, and then the fact is like, they're trying to like rush this process. And you know what happens when things are rushed. Yeah. Things don't turn out great.
Absolutely.
Right? So another thing too that's kind of coming off as a red flag is the priorities of the center and what they're trying to like, fulfill first versus what should be fulfilled first.
Right.
So like they're asking us like, like which is nice, right? They're like very like curious about what kind of gym equipment should we get for the center, what kind of appliances and this and that. When one of my supervisors had asked them, well, what kind of insurance are we getting? What do you mean? What kind of insurance? Yeah, the insurance that you're going to offer your coworkers, your peers, like employees, United. Like, what are you guys going to do? They don't have that lined up yet, dude. So it's like, and they expect the center to be opened up by this summer, and then you have, as it stands right now in my county, there's like about roughly like, I think like 90 employees basically. And they need, I think they said like roughly about 100 and something to open up and operate the center. So they're basically counting on every single person that is currently an active dispatcher to just say, yeah, fuck it, we'll let her roll over and just kick the show off, and still need to hire an additional maybe 10 or 15 dispatchers. But then there are some people that are like at the tail end of their retirement where they have like maybe like a year or two, maybe 3 change, right? Where they're getting ready to retire and they're not really wanting to start over at the bottom of the barrel.
Right.
And then keep in mind too, it's like you have multiple PSAPs and different people in those PSAPs that have different seniority, different pay scales and this and that. So it's like, how are you going to, consolidate all that and, still keep somewhat, everybody in their respective seniority? So are you telling me that someone that's been working at a center for 15, 16 years is going to lose all that seniority and start at
that's rough.
So
where do you want to go?
So here's a little sidekick to you. So I've told you what Jessica's trying to do for school, right? So thanks to God, and everything happens for a reason, right? So she got accepted to, she applied to a bunch of schools, right? So, but one of the schools that she applied to, it's called Ross University. I don't know if you ever heard of it.
I believe I have at some point.
So they have like I think from what Jessica told me, they have like one of like their sister or like a main hub school in Florida, but their actual main school where like she's gonna be gone for 2 years is in the Caribbean.
Okay.
So I've been thinking about looking for jobs that are remote to the point where, so that way I can potentially go out and, you know, live with her for a little bit.
Right.
But also too, it's just like I've had a lot of, you know, folks that are into, you know, hybrid freaking schedules. So they work from home, and some days they work at the office and stuff like that. But then being able to like just strictly work from home would be, you know, a pro for me in this situation, because Jessica would have to apply for a visa for me to go out and live with her. But unfortunately, under this visa, I wouldn't be able to work.
Okay.
So obviously I would have to find some means of having, you know, a financial stability, right?
Sure.
So I've been looking into like other like careers like cybersecurity, like IT work and this and that, where like you can basically work from home and still, you know, plug in and, you know,
talk to Alvarez.
Yeah, I know. And I've been thinking about like Alvarez, a lot of the people in cyber that do that kind of stuff. So I can, you know, see where I necessarily, you know, need to concentrate at as far as like certificates and like degrees.
I recommend you talk to Alvarez about that.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I do, because I want to make sure there's enough time for these last questions I have for you. There are 3 questions I normally ask every guest.
Okay.
And so first of all, thank you for staying this long.
No, honestly, bro, thank you for having me. Like, I know like you've been talking about this forever, and I like since you started it off, bro, I always thought it was a, you know, kick-ass idea, dude. Cause, you know, honestly, talking just talking itself, it's very healing. And I know if you said that before, and I've said that before too. And I've heard that a lot from my pops too. You know, there's nothing like talking, and, you know, like even like when you have like some sort of like a setback or some sort of like something that's like, you know, holding you back, you know, and then if it takes like tears or emotion to let it out, dude, by all means, you know, like I remember my dad would tell me that all the time. And like, I know like us, like as a male masculine, you know, like they always like try to associate with like feelings as like you're a pussy or like you're soft.
Right.
Fuck all that, dude. No, I don't know. Like if that's is your mean of healing, then by all means go for it, bro.
We're all
like,
humans, and I think we sometimes forget that because of the roles that the men want to put themselves in, and society puts the pressures on as well. But I think that as we go through this phase, that I think that is going to be healthy for us, which is to redefine where we are as a society, and as far as like roles and how men are raised and how women are raised. Because I mean, they're human beings at the end of the day. Yeah. So you cannot hide. Like if you push away feelings, they're just going to come out somewhere else. Yeah. Like they're just going to manifest in other ways. And and it's just better to let them out in the way that you interpret them rather than push them into something unhealthy. So I hope that we go down that route. But I did want to ask you, go ahead. Have you, what is it? We mentioned it a little bit, and I normally ask this at the end, but I mean, you kind of already talked about what your goals were. I wanted to see where your mind is at for this new year. You said you want to go remote, right? So, you're looking at IT. So that's something that you want to possibly look into, and honestly, cybersecurity. Just
like anything remote,
right?
Anything remote related that I honestly like can, you know, be able to provide, you know, as like the bare necessities for me and just right. Cause, there was also talk too that like if I can't, you know, secure something, because it's kind of like on a, like I'm on a time basis too, because she's set to be over there if no other school in the States accepted her. She would have to be over there and ready, I think, like by the end of the summer, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, that's pretty soon.
Or right around the summertime.
Yeah.
She's going to kill me if I don't know this.
No. Hey, man, I asked you a lot of questions today.
No, shit. No, so she had an opportunity to go even earlier in December. And like she would have to be there by like December 29th. She just told me this. Yeah. And she's like, no, it's too soon. I'm like, yeah, no, it's too soon. Especially with like having to figure everything out, like literally within a month. No, that's way too soon. Yeah. So she's like, yeah, we'll keep everything the way it is. And so it looks like around May time frame, and including like around the summer time frame, is when she would have to be over there and pretty much ready to engage and stuff. So I pretty much have like the first initial part of the year to kind of figure out and get something secured. Because the only other alternative to that would be like, obviously she would just go over there by herself, and I would just, you know, send her money to, you know, eat and stuff, whatever the case is, whatever she needs. and then I would potentially, talk to my parents and see if, I can move in with them for a little bit and just kind of like save up money and, do it that way, so that way I can kind of still pursue what I'm doing here now or my original career, which was to be in LA.
Right.
But then also too, it's like, I don't know what it is lately, but I just been having like such like a, how would I say, like a sudden change in heart of like everything that I wanted to do with life too. So like there was a point too where it's like, damn, I kind of want to be a pilot. And I'm thinking to myself, dude, like, fuck, if I can go back in time and change things, would I have been in the Marines? Maybe I would have gotten into the Air Force, maybe into the Navy, and like got my pilot's license a lot more easier and, through, the military versus having to do it out here. And I know we had one of our peers, who was it? You told me at the party that just got their pilot's license. I forgot who it was. Was it Kano? No, it wasn't Kano.
No, right? It wasn't Kano. Somebody got their pilot. Damn, I'm terrible. I don't.
Dude, yeah, someone at the party was like, oh yeah, he just got in his license. I'm like, who the fuck was it? I can't remember.
I can't for the life of me remember who. Oh well, we'll probably remember some of the time when we leave.
So I was like, damn, dude, like, and I'm thinking, I'm doing all this research and stuff like that, and it's like a lot of the stuff I can pretty much like be able to knock out on my own, but like a lot of it is like, and like money wise, it's like it's expensive, bro.
Right.
It's expensive. So.
It is expensive, but it's something that you can look into and see if it's something that you could potentially fund in some way. But I did want to ask you then. We talked about. I like to cover purpose,
right?
And so, have you discovered purpose? And if not, what do you think it might be?
You know what, dude? I know you had texted me this and like, kind of like a little brief outline of like what to expect. And I know for like the longest, like I felt like my purpose, and I remember like kind of having vivid flashbacks to when I was like very young and talked to my parents. And like, I told my mom, like, I didn't really care as like much about the career that I was going to be into, as long as it's like, I know that I'm helping people, like putting others before myself sometimes, just being like, is it selfless, right?
Yeah,
selfless and stuff like that. So, I think like I've kind of like figured that like my calling or like my kind of like thing that like, sits well with me is just helping people.
Right.
And I feel like that's why, like, although like the career that I'm in right now, like I may not necessarily be like 100% happy with it, or like it may not like necessarily be like what I expected to do in my like, my adult career, because like if you would go back to high school and you tap on my shoulder like, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? Never would have thought that 911 dispatching would come across my table, right? But it was just an opportunity that presented itself, and I just took it. And you know what, dude? At the end of the day, like I do enjoy this job. I do enjoy helping people, because like it just brings me, like great satisfaction that I can help somebody in like their times of need, and kind of like that kind of reconfirms like the things that I've said to my parents when I was younger. Like I just want to be able to help people, and that's why like. For the longest, I, wanted to be a cop, be able to help those in need, like help those that can help themselves as well. What I always say, a lot growing up, I want to be able to help those that can help themselves. And in this sense, like I'm still content with that, because I'm still doing that to a certain degree here. In the military, it was like, if we had to help, our country out, then so be it, and that's why like, I took that leap of faith to do that. But then also too, it's like, I saw this opportunity as far as talking about dispatching, right? I saw this opportunity, I took it, and I felt, like I do this for a little bit. That's even more, experience to put underneath my belt, put on my resume too. So when I do, decide that it's time to be, a cop, I can go to, the board and say, hey, I've been a Marine, I've been a 911 dispatcher, I've done X, Y, and Z. Like, I'm all about, the community. I'm all about helping, and that's to this day is still what I enjoy doing.
Right.
Like so I my wife volunteers on occasion on weekends at an animal shelter, so I go and help her out too, when occasionally and stuff like that. So just like being able to help people, as long as I'm like being able to help them out. That's all I really care about, and I think that's been ultimately like my purpose, is to necessarily like help out those that can help out themselves, in a sense too, like because like where I'm at now, like I'm really one of the only like bilingual speakers there. So like we serve primarily 3 communities. Out of the 3, 2 are predominantly Hispanic too. So a lot of the times people will come into the station and they'll like say like, hey, does anybody speak Spanish? Or like talk on the phone on 911, does anybody speak Spanish? they'll put them on hold and not have to pick up. So it's like, it makes me feel good that like, you know, I'm there with that purpose to be able to help out in that sense with, you know, being able to translate and stuff like that, whether it's on the phone or actually like on the scene and calls. Cause there's been so many, like domestic incidences that happen in the lobby where like they're fucking like fighting each other. Like, dude, you do realize where you're at, right? You're at a police department. You're fucking going ham on this shit. Like, wow, that's the whole different kind of, you know, balls or whatever. But yeah, then like I'll step out of the office and go with the officer and be like, hey, you know, talk to this lady, figure out what's going on. And I'll sit down with her. I'm like, hey, you know, obviously in Spanish, like what's going on, que está pasando and everything like that. And I would have to translate that and stuff like that. So, and there'll be occasions too where like, you know, I have to be sure that I'm doing this correctly though. Cause like if it does become a case and it gets sent up to, you know, the court, I would have to go to court and testify too, because I was the one that was like translating and doing all that crap. So I've had that happen once and I didn't have to go on the stand, but I was like, kind of put on a standby, kind of like a jury thing. And then they're like, oh no, they're gonna pass the case, so you don't need to be here. You can go home. Like, oh,
right.
But yeah, I mean, and yeah, to answer your question, I think that my purpose has just been, you know, just to be, you know, be there for others, help out people. So
it's more than enough.
Yeah, I'm doing that now.
It's more than enough.
Yeah.
If you could speak to your childhood self, what would you say?
If I could speak to my childhood self, what would I say? I would just say, keep on rocking, kid. Keep on rocking. You know, just keep. Yeah, I would just say, keep on rocking. You know, don't keep chasing your dreams. You know, I would say, and just yeah, because honestly, like I told you before, like what I necessarily changed, or you know, do I regret anything like up to this point? No, maybe just the school part, just a little bit, or I felt that like maybe I could have done it a little bit sooner. You know, as far as like community college, right? Because I let that shit like, you know, just fly past me, you know? And obviously it's never too late to go back, right? But like, I felt like maybe had I gone, maybe like, I was still in the Marines, right? With you guys. And had I gone to like, you know, some sort of community college and done like my gen ed or something like that, or just, you know, my basic associates, I could be in a much, maybe a little bit of a better position. But I mean, honestly, dude, like I have everything that I need. No me falta nada. I have food on my table. I have a roof over my head. My wife's happy. I'm happy. You know, so like, I mean, that's all I can really care about it, you know, as a writer, you know, just making sure that everything's good to go, you know? So, I would just tell my younger self, just keep on kicking, dude. Just keep on kicking and fucking baja la tortilla.
All right, man. Thank you so much for being on. It's honestly a pleasure to have you. And my goal is to have a lasting relationship with you guys. Of course, bro. And that people get to see what that's like, because obviously life goes on and life changes for everybody. So my hope is that I get to have you on more often, at least once a year.
Oh, yes,
and see how you're doing, and hopefully things turn out the way that you want them.
Yeah,
so,
bro.
Thanks for being on.
I'm only a phone call away, dude, a text away. So honestly, not just for this, but if you ever need anything, bro, like, you know, we're brothers for life, bro. So I
appreciate you,
dude. Yes.
Thank you. And cut.